Thank you so much for attending my PowerPoint presentation on removed talents. Valve's hidden shame. The talent system, which was first introduced into Dota along with patch 7.00, is an important part of every hero's game plan, setting up important power spikes and giving access to unique matchup-specific tech. Or at least that's the idea, because in the modern form of the talent system, players usually pick the exact same ones every single game, regardless of the situation. But even though this is the second time I've complained about it in a video this week, it's important to recognize that the talent system used to be so much worse. This is because Valve chose to hit the crack pipe just one time too many when they were developing 7.00, which is also part of why we have Monkey King. So as a fun bit of retrospective and a little bit of nostalgia bait, I thought it would be fun to look back at some of the interesting ideas that came out in the initial form of the system. And the first of these ideas was GPM and XP boosters for a ton of different heroes. Consistent scaling is one of the most important elements of Dota because it allows all the players on both teams to track the power spikes of both their enemies and their allies. But Dota 3 completely ruined that idea because it began handing out flat GPM bonuses and percentile XP boosts to a ton of different heroes. Some of the most impactful of these were a ton of supports who wound up getting GPM talents at level 10 that they could use to finance their Sentry Ward addiction for the remainder of the match. Almost every dedicated position 4 and 5 hero had access to one of these boosters, which means that you would see Crystal Maiden walking around with an Aghanim Scepter that she absolutely didn't deserve, and Disruptor strolling around with a Giga Brain. Core heroes often had access to these as well, but they were usually locked behind later tiers in the talent tree, so it wasn't uncommon to see support players keeping pace with their position 2 well after the 30-minute mark. Now, of course, it wouldn't be a Valve game if they didn't crank the numbers to the extreme for no good reason, which is why Puck had access to one of the funniest level 25 talents in the game, which was straight 300 GPM. This was useless for multiple reasons, but the biggest one is that because you got it at level 25, you would have at least 5 real items that you couldn't necessarily replace, and it wasn't like Aghanim Shard or Blessing were in the game yet. But at least Valve had the humor to buff it up to 420 GPM, the funny weed number, just a couple of patches later. Now Valve at least had the decency to put all of the XP boost talents at or before level 15, but notably, Tome of Knowledge was still in the game at this point. It was fully buffed by the XP talents, which means that there were strategies where teams with a Broodmother or a Beastmaster would intentionally save Tome of Knowledge and give it to one of their core heroes whenever they happened to hit level 10. This meant that there were strategies where you would intentionally save the Tome of Knowledge until a core hero got their level 10 XP boost talent, which means that you would see a Broodmother walking around at level 15 at 18 minutes. In the modern version of Dota, there are still some remnants of these ideas, such as Weaver being able to get XP from his baby bugs gnawing on your cheeks, and also the entire character of Alchemist. But these boosters were removed for a very good reason, and I don't expect to ever see them added back into the game. If you'd like to help support my own talents, you can check my Patreon, linked in the description below. The lowest tier, which costs approximately the same as a gas station hot dog in the United States, will allow you to watch all of my videos ad-free as soon as I'm done editing them. And at the highest tier, you're entitled to custom audio recordings, handwritten letters, and even replay reviews starting this month. The link is in the description below, and if you're already a patron, thank you very much for your continued support. The next genre of talents that we'll be discussing are related to attack and cast range, and I cannot stress enough just how insanely spread throughout the game these talents were in the initial version of the system. I haven't done the math because I was born in North America and we haven't learned how to do that yet, but I can estimate that around half, if not more, of all Dota heroes had some way of being further away from you than they had any right to be. Now, most of the attack range talents were relegated to the 20 or 25 tier, but some of the numbers on them were absolutely insane, such as Shadow Fiend getting an additional 150 and Jakiro getting plus 400. They even gave one to Sniper of all heroes, giving him an additional 100 attack range at level 25, but at least they hadn't added Ballista to the game yet. And in the period of the game before ranged cores could hit you from across the Grand Canyon, a ton of position 4s and 5s got insane cast range buffs that make Aether Lens look like a joke. Bane, Chen, Dazzle, and Crystal Maiden all have very powerful spells that are balanced by the fact that they have frail little bitch bodies, but with that kind of cast range, you're not getting anywhere near them. And all of these talents stacked perfectly with already existing items that buffed cast and attack range, so you would find heroes with either an Aether Lens or a Dragon Lance attempting to turn Dota into a sniper duel. The worst offenders of all were heroes like Lina, Razor, and the aforementioned Jakiro, who had access to both range boosters, meaning that they could stick at the backline of every fight and there wasn't really much you could do about it. Hell, Valve basically went into a fugue state and even buffed Roshan's attack range from 128 to 150 just so that the big guy wouldn't feel left out. The third category of talent that has almost been entirely phased out of the game are just a bunch of generic stats. You see, coming up with 8 optional upgrades for the 120 or so different heroes that existed in Dota at that time is a lot of work, and I don't necessarily blame Valve for throwing down the pen and saying screw it, give them some agi. But this resulted in situations where a ton of heroes were picking up nice little coughing babies to add to their build, while others were grabbing hydrogen bombs straight out of the secret shop. In many cases, these were tiny little bonuses that didn't do anything to affect the way that you played the game, and some of them were just downright stupid. My favorite example of this was Nyx Assassin at level 15 having to choose between 10 strength or 25 agility, and notably, Nyx Assassin was an agility hero at the time. Despite that classification, the stat was so useless to him that Valve really thought it was fair to make you pick between an Eagle Song and an Ogre Axe. Humorously enough, giving a ton of fake agility gain to the actual agility heroes was completely broken, and those were the first ones that Valve started removing from the game. And as a fun observation, almost all of the bonus stats were given out in increments of 5, with the notable exceptions of Mirana and Viper. This makes me think that one of Valve's in-house mid players got absolutely trashed during a testing game, and resulted in both of those getting nerfed as a form of revenge. Of course, one small upside to this system is that it played very nicely in ability draft. These days, with so many talents being specific to a hero or their abilities, it's common to see AD players pick the bonus gold throughout the entire game, which can give you a small taste of the GPM booster impact of yesteryear. I wrote a little bit about my true feelings regarding the talent tree when it was first added to Dota. Feel free to read it if you like. And finally, the talents that you clicked on this video hoping to reminisce about and I was contractually obligated to put last, respawn talents. These were talents that would reduce your respawn timer by a flat number, and they were just as broken as they sound. Heroes like Oracle and Phoenix could chop 20 seconds off their respawn timer as soon as they hit level 10, effectively reverting the countdown back to what it was when they were level 2. Plenty of other supports had ways of reducing their respawn timer by 35 seconds or more, but by far the worst offenders were Lone Druid and Lina. Starting at level 20, LD could reduce his respawn timer by a massive 50 seconds, which means that even killing him in the late game wouldn't guarantee the ability to take high ground. Lina's wasn't nearly as egregious at 25 seconds, but she was able to get it at level 15, and it was fairly common for her to pick up a Bloodstone in this patch. Only the real Dota boomers will remember that that item used to reduce your respawn time by however many charges you had on it, which would result in you killing Alina and her occasionally just popping back up immediately in the fountain, ready to go. These were probably the most egregious examples of what the talent system did to Dota, and I don't blame Valve for removing it almost immediately. Messing with respawn timers is a pretty bad thing to do, but it still took them 31 more patches until they took out the extended respawn timer when being killed by Necro ult. Fun fact, in order to make the current Undying innate, Valve had to go into the back closet, grab all of the respawn timer talents, mush them into a ground paste, and shove them into his mouth. In conclusion, talents are a deprecated system, and you should have skilled them when you had the chance. A lot of players think that Valve is omniscient and omnipresent when it comes to the further development of Dota, but the talents patch is proof that they really are just a bunch of dudes. Peace on planet Earth.